Good morning. Thank you very much for attending the Managed Cloud Breakfast briefing. Hope you're all well. Just a couple of things to go over before I jump in. This is kind of an interactive session, or an interactive session, so to speak. Whilst you're kind of muted from a microphone perspective, if you do have any questions, please feel free to ask them in the chat window that you have. Also, as well, we have taken some questions that you've asked from when you registered for the service anyway, or for the breakfast briefing itself. So we have picked some of those questions out so we can respond to them directly. But if you have any further ones, then please feel free to get in touch after the fact as well. Okay. But just to go through what the agenda is for the Managed Cloud Breakfast briefing. So we're going to go through, of course, some of the Ultima's capabilities, so our partnership capabilities, how we do what we do, and obviously what we can do on behalf of you as a consumer of public cloud services. Before we go into, standard challenges around cloud adoption and what trends we're seeing today, what we're being asked about more and more, obviously then where are customers going really from a cloud-based perspective. Following which, of course, we'll go through the managed cloud offering, go through some of the key pillars of what we actually do deliver, and over to how we deliver that from our service desk, etc., through to some of those key questions that you raised as part of the registration. Before we go through any next steps and how, obviously, then Ultima could, how we can assist moving forward past that point as well. Okay. But just an introduction to me, first and foremost, to be fair. So my name's Craig Wordsworth. I am Head of Cloud Pre-Sales here at Ultima. I've been here for 6 months now, but I've been in the IT industry as a whole for about 11.5 years. In a previous life, so to speak, in a previous role, I was solutions architect, or been in pre-sales for pretty much that entire time. Started off in private cloud, so architecting general DC refresh projects, backup DR, those kind of things. Around about 5-6 years ago, I moved into the public cloud space, initially into Azure, but then, of course, obviously, as trends grow and requirements change, obviously into AWS as well. Okay, so I've got a good grounding and a good background in solution architecture. But my primary responsibility here at Ultima is the cloud go-to-market strategy. Okay, so all the services that we offer from obviously cloud adoption perspective are all my responsibility to create, own, present, those kind of things. But underneath that, all of what my responsibilities is driving the adoption of public cloud services, whether or not it's to start a project or start consuming starting from zero, so to speak, or whether you're more mature and you just want to utilize advanced services. It's all around that adoption of those public cloud services as well. Now, just to kind of take a bit of a step back in terms of what our cloud capabilities are, we have gone through a rebrand recently, to be fair, and a lot of what our key pillars, all of our services actually are built around these 4 key areas: advise, design and plan, deliver and manage. Okay, and I suppose the key point to take away is that all the services that we offer have an alignment to any stage of that cloud adoption journey, regardless of whether or not you are starting from scratch and you want to understand the TCO and how you'd migrate and what services you could adopt and how you do that, or you're in public cloud today, you're fairly mature, but you want to start using advanced services, whatever that might be, and everything in between. There is alignment of those services to you. Okay. So it makes it really easy to be able to cherry pick certain services that you might need to consume or want to consume, or look at certain areas as well. But we achieve that through our partnerships, right? So effectively then, none of that would be possible to be able to do that in Microsoft and AWS, Azure, unless we had those partnerships and those accreditations. And that's a key thing that we do have and that we're very strong in. Okay, so starting from Microsoft, we're a 14-time gold partner. So we're highly accredited across multiple, obviously, Microsoft services, which is great, especially from a hybrid cloud perspective. But the key areas really where we do excel: Windows SQL Advanced Specialization, Azure Virtual Desktop Advanced Specialization. What that really enables us to do, or well, what enables us to trust in us, is basically then that we are effective and a trusted partner to design, optimize, manage, for example, within Microsoft Azure. Okay, that stretches to things like funding models, so Azure Migrate and Modernize program through those advanced specializations. Really key is things like funding programs, incentives on training, upskilling, and those kind of things. that really helps any kind of cloud adoption program, regardless of whether, again, you're starting from scratch or you're further utilizing more services. You want to optimize into more services. But equally as well, from an AWS perspective, we're an advanced tier partner. So we align to the solution provider program, the well-architected partner program. The key point really is we have skill sets in both platforms to basically achieve a solution or provide a solution based on the best needs of you as a consumer of those services. Okay. But what you will see, and what I hope that we provide, as an overarching kind of strategy, is everything that we do is multi-platform by design. So making sure that as you are moving more from on-prem into public cloud, or moving from public cloud to public cloud and utilizing both platforms, it's making sure that the services that we can offer can fit both, right? And there's no kind of fundamental shifts or changes in terms of how that service is offered. It's the same kind of idea, the same kind of solution, if you will, that can just be extended, and it makes it very, very easy to consume on that basis. And Ultima today, to be fair, I mean, a lot of you would already know Ultima, of course. We've been in the industry for over 30 years now. We started off in infrastructure design and support, of course, and we've evolved over the years as trends and requirements have changed, right? So as a result, past 12 years plus, we've been very much cloud, within cloud, or providing cloud expertise to our customers. And obviously that, again, in turn has evolved into things like managed cloud, being able to provide CSP billing, etc., for licensing in Azure, for example, through to things like automation through our IA cloud service, robotic process automation, also things like Microsoft 365. The key thing that my takeaway was, especially when I started, is the fact that Ultima provide that true end-to-end. We provide that true end-to-end kind of service, whereby we can not only provide migrations in 365 and Azure and AWS, of course, but we can also manage the licensing element too, and those kind of areas. We've got expertise in each area. Okay, so it makes sure that you're not having to leverage multiple parties, where obviously in my experience, again, experience based, it's confusion can reign at that point. And there's that one-stop shop to be able to actually then say, okay, from A to B, what does my migration look like, and how does that work? Okay, and as a result, of course, you can see 10,000 hours plus of migration experience, highly accredited in things like Microsoft 365, multiple vendors as well, in order to achieve and provide a solution that is tailored and bespoke to your requirements. But from a cloud adoption perspective, you've probably seen a lot of this before, to be fair. The challenge is that the cloud adoption, the challenges in general have been the same for the past 2 to 3 years, really, if not a little bit longer, in the sense that time, talent, tooling, effectively those 3 key areas, to be fair. And taking a bit of a step back, to be perfectly honest on that, but we still come across customers whereby they've either built in public cloud and didn't know what they didn't know, for example, and got themselves into a bit of trouble, which is easy to do. Or the fact of the matter is they're a multi-skilled IT team and they need to start adopting public cloud, and they need assistance with upskilling, etc., as well. But notwithstanding, it's making sure that a target operating model itself is geared up well enough to do that. Is my tooling that I use today, does it support public cloud, for example? Do I need to enable any of the licensing models? Do we need to upgrade? Do we need a new solution for this, that, and the other? And that's where the pitfalls generally become. And like I said, it's been the same across the past 2 to 3 years. But kind of expanding that out, from a talent perspective, you'll know better than I will. Your internal IT teams are multi-skilled, which is really great. The fact that there's a multi-talented team. You might have VMware, Hyper-V, physical service, for example. There's Windows in there somewhere, for example, but there's also like networking, backup, DR, general hardware management. There's EUC VDI, patch management. You name it, that's all in there. Okay, and it's making sure that obviously then when we expand into new services, that we can effectively utilize that pool of talent, but also extend their services into new kind of areas. But equally, even if you had the talent, a lot of the problem is time. BAU based tasks, etc. New projects, new deployments of applications. Even if it's the adoption of PaaS resources, for example, if you're already in public cloud. But support incidents, P1s, firmware, hardware. You get the picture. There's a load of individual tasks that a team does that people don't necessarily see either. They might be described as fairly mundane tasks, but nevertheless, they are very, very critical to the running of any kind of business and IT infrastructure effectively to provide that service. So these are all things that taking up time, and again, no pun intended, time and time again we come across, when we're talking to customers, it's like, the capacity is limited in my team. It's really, really difficult. We're stretched, we're over provision because we're dealing with all these challenges. How do we look at new technologies? How do we make sure that we can do that in the right way, because that's what we want to do? And like I said, finally as well, is looking at that tooling element. Typically, or generally speaking, as part of any kind of cloud adoption, you'd look at current operating model and target operating model. What tools am I using today? What do I need for the tomorrow, so to speak? And a lot of those end up being not re-provisioned, but changed, amended, refined, backup, DR, those patching, those kind of things. But also as well, there'll be new tools that effectively, pardon me, apologies. There are new tools effectively that tooling that you'd need to then align to a new operating model to effectively manage and operate within public cloud as well. Okay, and the challenge that you've got is putting them all together causes a challenge, right? Those three key areas are contingent on each other, making sure that you've got that perfect storm, so to speak, where you've got the talent in-house, you're building that up, you've got the time to focus on new projects, and also you've got the tooling that enables you to then effectively operate across those new projects, other than those new platforms as well. Just a bit of a flavour of some of the key areas that you need to start looking at. Azure, AWS, generally speaking, those are two completely different operating models from on-prem in terms of how we would consume, services, how quickly and agile that we can operate, how we can then better ourselves to be able to enable us to move quicker in a standardized manner, but it's protected as well from a business perspective. And that that opens the door to, like I said, cost management optimization is a really, really key one. We pay for everything that we consume in public cloud, literally everything we consume down to the IO level, and it's making sure we've got full visibility into there, and how do we react against that? How do we see challenges arising based on mobility, increasing in 1 day, 2 days by 10%? How do we make sure we can monitor that and retrospectively change that? But equally as well, again, how do we move faster? Automation is a really key part of that, and that is obviously a really wide, really encompassing topic. How do you start? How do you expand? How do you build your skill sets in there? And luckily, from my perspective, and obviously the theme really will be, is Ultima perfectly positioned to be able to support all of those, regardless of where you are or the services that you look to consume. But from a current trends perspective, again, unfortunately, the challenge is we're still in that cycle of companies still looking to adopt public cloud. There's some very, very mature companies in public cloud, don't get me wrong, but a lot of what we come across is that kind of low maturity, which is not a problem in any way, shape or form, but it's worth highlighting that security, for example, is really, really key, front and center in everyone's mind now. How do I make sure that my platform is as secure as possible when I build within public cloud? It's all around best practice alignment, making sure you're adopting Microsoft Cloud Adoption Framework or Azure well-architected framework kind of policies, to be fair, those key pillars that you should build on top of, which extend to things like role-based access control, multi-factor authentication. How do I make sure I've got conditional access? Those kind of things that you'd be working with on a day-to-day basis, especially if you're in Office 365. Really, really powerful when it comes to Azure. But that obviously, of course, it still extends to firewall and perimeter security. I'm extending my perimeter, aren't I? In that, if you think about it, I'm enabling a great level of workload mobility. My applications are moving between platforms. That's really great, but it's making sure that as they move, I can protect them and make sure they continue to be protected, and notice anomalies as they go through things like Sentinel, etc. Multi-cloud again throws complexity into that mix. Of course, it does. We're seeing a trend now as of course, we always recommend that as you look to adopt public cloud, you pick one, and you start with one and get great at one. That could be Azure, could be AWS, depending on what you're adopting, how you're adopting it, and obviously your skill sets and how well they align, of course. But as consumers become more mature, you kind of abstract from that layer, and you start to look at, okay, well, actually, which platform is best for my application? You start to creep into the AWSs if you're in Azure, or vice versa. And it's making sure that, again, in my opinion, you go around the wheel in terms of skill sets. You start with another skill shortage, because obviously then you need to start supporting a different kind of area, different acronyms, albeit the platforms are very similar. They work differently fundamentally, and it's difficult for a single team to support both. And then finally, it's automation. Again, I've mentioned it a couple of times now. We're getting now asked in past 3 to 6 months, especially, it's coming up more and more. How do I start my infrastructure as code journey? How do I create deployment templates for these key kind of repeatable tasks that I'm performing, how do I make sure that I can onboard things, not from just deploying infrastructure, but onboarding into management software, deploying, key agents, antivirus, making sure it's all fully monitored. How can I do that as quickly as possible? And equally then, what does that look like when I move it into DevOps or integrating into, my ServiceNow platform, service management and stuff like that? It's also stretching to things like, I don't want to have to do a rehost migration, to be fair. I don't want to have to do a lift and shift. Can I not just rebuild a server if I have to migrate to a server and then just move the data? And I can basically make sure that it's all, the state of that server is then all completely controlled by a central solution as well. So it's really interesting conversations that we're having. And these buzzwords realistically have been around for, well, you would have seen them a number of years, but equally they're very prevalent in the market right now, and things are starting to gain a little bit more traction as we go. So from a managed cloud perspective, and how do we really help from that perspective? So I'm not going to go completely around this wheel, and the main reason being is because, I'm sure, as a managed cloud provider, you'd expect a certain level of features, right? Service management, having some kind of tooling that we can link into, in terms of cost management, optimization, etc. Providing monitoring and support from a technical support desk, those kind of things. Billing, of course, giving you visibility into your billing cycles and stuff. Those things are standard. You should be expecting them from any kind of managed cloud provider. It's the differentiators that are really, really key. And obviously, as you'll know, part of in the industry today, there are a lot of providers that can provide similar services. How we differentiate across that platform, or how do we differentiate across that landscape? And the key really thing is there's 3 or 4 that I'd like to pick out from this wheel really. IA Cloud is a really, really key one. The one thing that we've done differently to other providers is that we leverage our own tool. We've built our own our own internal IP cloud management platform to deliver managed cloud. So IA Cloud is just that platform. Obviously it's web-based. We use it to hook into AWS and Azure environments. It provides cost on optimization, soon to provide cost management capabilities as well, and full trending. It provides automation capabilities, alignment to CIS, vulnerability capabilities and stuff like that. But I suppose the really important thing about it is because we own it, we can make changes very, very quickly, and that's basically what we find as a trend right now. From my perspective, I'm really, really laser focused on things like feedback loops, making sure that internally and externally we can constantly evolve and better our service based on feedback. And specifically around that area, the tooling that we use and how we operate that tool and how we deliver it to customers, being able to actually pivot, change, refine very, very quickly is really, really powerful. Example again of is automation again. So the one thing that we did based on feedback is I want to be able to automate patching. I want to be able to automate my backups. I want to be able to automate delivery of, I don't know, Defender, antivirus. When something's been deployed within public cloud, for example, Azure in this instance, and I want to make sure that I've got that safety net kind of feature, but equally as well, my schedules are all up to date and I can set them all up and it all just kind of goes. And the only point I want to get involved is when there's a problem, which ultimately at that point from a service desk perspective can do. And that's exactly what it does. It's built to save BAU time out of the box really, really easily. Okay. Secondly to that, it's all around service management. So of course, there's 2 angles to this, and we'll go through this in an enablement piece over the next few slides. But it's all around then how do we make sure that, again, yes, we're continuously improving the service. You have got a main point of contact, non-technical, throughout the service. You don't want to be going to your account manager to do that because they can't react quick enough, let's be honest. It's someone who is the fronting of that service, who can then got very, very quick ties to the support center or service desk and internally managed services. That's really, really key. So on the first basis, we align service delivery manager, who is exactly that resource. They are there primarily to be that escalation point, that single point of contact, and be your internal champion, for example. Again, we'll go through this in a bit more detail, but equally as well, illustrate the good, the bad, the ugly on monthly service reviews, but push you on in making those savings. We've highlighted maybe through IA Cloud that we can save you, I don't know, a couple of grand a month, for example. These are how we can do it. Let's go and do it, pushing you on doing that and making sure that we're as efficient as we can actually be. But the missing area to that is service architecture. It's that technical element as well. The one thing that I found based on my own experience is that, generally speaking, and this comes from if you're starting from scratch, coming from an on-prem mindset, on-prem DC, you think about when you refresh a data center, you would refresh it, you would build, you'd amalgamate your requirements, you'd build growth in maybe 10% year on year, you'd deploy that platform, obviously after procuring it, you'd migrate to it, and generally speaking, that would be very static by design. The cost is written off over that period, whether 3, 5, 7 years, whatever that might be. You might do upgrades, firmware, OS, that new deployments, but generally speaking, at that point, you don't really do much with it because it's there to host that, those VMs and etc. or those services. Whereas, of course, in public cloud, it's completely different. We're constantly looking to reduce cost and increase value back to the business. How do we do that? And that's where service architecture comes in, and it's really, really powerful again, in the sense of adoption of advanced services, new projects. How do we make sure that we can do that? And in some cases as well, saving money as well. And the final thing to that is licensing. Again, I'm going to reiterate licensing and the fact that not all providers can give you that full circle view of your licensing, your billing, how we would then in Azure, for example, use hybrid use benefit, or then make sure that we're covered from Microsoft licensing, for example, in AWS. Having a team that you can call on to do that is really, really powerful as well. But from actually just expanding out that support capability, okay, so of course it's 24/7 coverage. You'd expect that, right? It's based out of Reading. That's our technical support center. Is based out of our head office, what we're looking to do actually as well, a bit of a visionary piece, is expand that to a follow the sun support model. That's in the roadmap today to be delivered over the next 12 months. The whole idea realistically is what you don't want to be doing. If you've got a P1 at 3 o'clock in the morning, what you don't want to really realistically be doing is getting a tier 3 guy out of bed. Realistically, what we want to be doing is be able to say, well, actually, we've got a resource sat in the US, as part of Ultima's support center, or Australia, Singapore, wherever they might be, ready to go really quickly to respond. They're sharp, they're not rubbing their eyes, etc. They're just going to crack on and get provide you with the support that you need, and that's exactly what we're looking to do. So watch that space really in terms of how we expand that service. But it's that full stack support that we can offer, which is really, really powerful. So of course, Ultima, or our Ultima group of companies, we are a group of companies in our own right. One of the companies we own is called Just After Midnight. So whilst we provide platform support and we are experts in the Azure and AWS platforms, we're Just After Midnight are really, really where their messaging is really powerful is in those cloud native architectures, microservices, web applications, whereby it's an e-commerce platform and it needs to be up and running 24/7. If it's a revenue generator, if it goes down, you lose money. You need someone who's supporting that 24/7 as well. And it's a really, really powerful message in the fact that they can then support, they can take on existing infrastructures or develop new ones for you on your behalf and support them for you on your behalf as well, with Ultima supporting that platform underneath, giving that end-to-end visibility right the way from infrastructure right the way up to the application as well. So really, really powerful on that basis. Of course, we're saying it's tech enabled. That IA cloud piece is really powerful. Developed IP, being able to change, pivot, amend, add new services as and when we go, not relying on third-party providers, which is a lot of cloud solution providers do for managed cloud. They do, and you're very much then restricted in terms of what you can do with that tooling and what more value you can offer. Whereas what we can do is we can build that value in on an ongoing basis and continuously improve that platform as well. And generally, the strapline for anything that we do is protecting revenues 24/7. Being able to actually provide you, with regardless of where you are and what kind of company you are, being able to actually provide you with that full stack support right there from the infrastructure, as I mentioned, on a 24/7 basis. Okay, and that level really goes from right the way through, from consultation right the way through to management as well. So it's not just a case of give us your stuff, we'll support it. It's an ever-going basis. We can expand it. We can help you to build it out, build new capabilities, etc., as and when you need them as well. To expand on the TSC, to be fair, like I said, the 24/7 ISO accredited technical support center. The key thing is there've been, it's been a capability there for over 20 years. The point being is mature as a service. It clearly works, of course. But again, through CSI, we constantly evolve our practice in terms of how we can improve. But these guys are multi-skilled engineers, so it's not just, I'm an Azure guy, there's an AWS guy, there's infrastructure people as well in there, there's application experts in there as well. The key thing is they can triage things really, really easily. To make sure that we can support you as quickly and as effectively as possible. But from a managed cloud perspective, the cost model is really, really simple. what we used to do, legacy, a couple of years ago, is provide a simple monthly percentage based on of your bill. So you'll find that the majority, if not all, of managed cloud providers will do that. Just because, you know, as you grow into, and shrink actually arguably as well, but as you grow into public cloud, as your consumption grows, obviously as a managed cloud provider, our overheads do grow as well, but not in the same linear pattern. So for example, if you started off spending £10,000 a month in public cloud, you double to £20,000 a month, it doesn't necessarily mean that our overheads double, and that is then represented in our consumption tiers. And what it allows us to do is to fit you into a certain tier, kind of lock your prices in at that tier in terms of how you pay for managed clouds. It doesn't grow on a monthly basis. It allows you to budget effectively, but also have scalability to grow to an upper tier as well. So a good example would be, we have a £5,000 to £10,000 a month consumption tier, or 10,000 to 20,000. You know, pick one of them, the 10,000 to 20,000 one. You might be consuming 14, 15 grand. You know, you pay for the tier and it'll actually let you flex right the way up, well, within that tier, but also right the way up to 20. So it gives you that scalability, until which point it might be better to move up to the next tier. That next tier would have a lower percentage representation for our overheads, because inevitably, come back to it, we wouldn't necessarily increase our overheads at the same rate as your consumption increases. So you get a good economies of scale as you grow as well. But I mentioned the enablement piece, so just to kind of dive a little bit deeper. So service management, these are baked into the managed cloud tier. Managed cloud, the core offering that we provide. And the main reason being for that, again, it comes back to the whole idea that, if no one's pushing from the partner side, and our dedicated resources is what I'm talking about, if they don't push from the partner side to help you to make savings, where we might find a couple of grand a month using that kind of example, it will never get done. That's experience. It could be different in some companies, but generally speaking, it doesn't get done. So making sure that you have that representative that you can escalate to, you've got a good point of contact with, they're doing monthly service reviews, like I said, they're showing the good, the bad, the ugly of the service, which is always really important. It's making sure that we're continuously pushing that service and improving it as well, and making sure that you are operating it as efficiently as possible with your existing environment. Okay, existing be the key word, because when we're talking about new services, and whether or not that is transformation activities moving into public cloud or transformation activities within public cloud, technical points of contact are really important at that point. And again, the same kind of idea is service architecture is built within the managed cloud core offering. So whereas in service management you get a named service delivery manager, in service architecture you get a named cloud solutions architect. The whole idea there is they are the technical concept, they're highly technical in the relevant area. So for example, Azure, and they will be there to work with the service manager, but B, to build a relationship with your IT team or your wider team. So basically to become a true extension of your team, of course. And B, to understand the environment, in great detail. C, to then understand your roadmap, what you're looking to do, what is your strategy. And then lastly, D, to then start to look at your existing environment and go, okay, you've got SQL and IaaS there. Can we look to put it into SQL managed instance, or can we look to, whatever, go to app service, elastic beanstalk, whatever that might be, to increase the value back to the business, and if possible reduce the cost. Okay, that becomes really, really powerful, again, because it means that we're not just standing still, as someone there evangelizing and pushing you to enable that vision and move into those new services in that protected way. Okay, but lastly, what I've not mentioned is that guidance and validation piece. Upskilling is really, really important, and of course, through the vendors, Microsoft and AWS, they will then obviously support you to give you, tailored training courses. They will give you training vouchers, certification vouchers, so you can go to classroom-based training. But my opinion is that only takes you so far. Experience-based training is really, really important. Obviously, then being able to, have for lack of a better term, have a play around with the platform, not break things, but maybe in a sandbox, have been able to break things and stuff like that, and ask questions of a key technical contact would allow you then to actually utilize those skills and actually use them on the job, if you will. And that's where that guidance and validation piece comes into play. So ad hoc queries, for example, how would I do this? What is this service? How can I leverage it? I'm thinking of doing this. What do you think? I've designed this architecture. Can you validate it for me? Can you put it through change advisory and stuff like that? generally speaking, then they can push you in the right direction. Say, yeah, no, that looks great. Crack on. For example, do you need any assistance? Yes or no? Crack on. Or it could be, no, do it this way because of this reason. Use this tooling because of this reason. That's really powerful. So we always have that conversation. Even if it's an initial kind of 12-month managed cloud agreement, that upskilling really gives you that comfort blanket, that pillow, if you will, coverage to enable you to grow as a team. With someone in the background who is supporting you, and at any point of that journey as well. And that does give way to kind of other areas, to be perfectly honest. What you will find from that service architecture piece, the CSA at some point will come up to, okay, well, we've identified we can adopt this service, or you've got a new project and we're going to do it this way. Do you want support to do that? And you'll either go yes or no. And if you went yes, it's how do we make sure that we can move as fast as possible? What you don't want to be doing is going, yes, Mr. CSA, let's document this and let's go back to the selling cycle. And then all of a sudden, any momentum that you've created slows down because you've got to go back through pre-sales, sales, raise orders and stuff like that. And this is where token-based support comes into, token-based professional services, comes into play. It's a token-based offering based on half-day increments, which allows you to draw down prepaid time, for lack of a better term. It allows you to draw down against any professional services resource within the business. Okay, so there's a rate card, that you can draw down those half-day increments, obviously depending on the rate card, depending on how many tokens you need to use. But the point being then is the CSA could turn around and go, well, actually, that's 5 tokens. That do you want to shall we just move on? Yes, we'll move on, and it goes straight into the professional services team. There's no sales cycle you need to get involved in. It allows you to move as quickly as possible, and it's integrated directly into managed cloud. So it's actually delivered as part of managed cloud. Of course, it is. And to be clear, it is an additional kind of cost to do that. But like I said, it allows you to move as fast as possible when you identify new projects or additional adoption projects or transformation projects, whatever that might be. Now, of course, the more you buy, the cheaper that per token cost becomes as well. So it's completely up to you whether you'd want to use that, but like I said, it allows you to move quick. So a good example again would be, I'm migrating into public cloud. The general stage 1 migrations we find tend to be VM based, with a little bit of PaaS adoption, because a balance between risk and pace, being able to move quickly, not changing too many things, because we're adopting a new platform. There's a load of spinning plates. We don't want to have to then learn how to adopt a web app, for example, and then support it, etc., and all the kind of good stuff that comes around that. It's making sure that we give ourselves a platform and a springboard to say, okay, we're in here now. Let's stabilize for 6 months. Let's make sure that we're upskilling, and we're getting to comfortable. Let's then move on and let's do these new projects. And that's exactly where something like this would be really powerful. Okay. So that kind of concludes some of the managed cloud kind of overview. Like I said, what at the beginning of this session is that there are some key questions that were asked as part of registration. So I've picked out 4. I think it's 4 I've picked out anyway, and I'm going to answer them directly as well on behalf. Well, so hopefully you'll get the value out the back of them as well. So a lot of them are around security, by the way, just to be clear. But so what does Ultima see as the #1 security threat to cloud security right now, and how can this change over time? I'm going to be completely frank. Users, technical users, normal users, etc. Okay, and we see this a lot. We provide, and you'll see this over a couple of slides time, we provide assessments through pre-sales across Azure and AWS platforms, and what we see is time and time again, yes, there's always money to be saved and stuff like that. That's really key, but a lack of best practice alignment. And best practice, of course, we will know Cloud Adoption Framework for Microsoft, the World Architecture Framework for AWS, constantly change, constantly evolve, and they're very, very wide ranging by design, right? There's a lot you can do within public cloud to then restrict certain actions and stuff like that, which, it comes back to skilling. You don't know what you don't know. I've done checks before, and a couple of years ago, where I've seen a consumer of Azure, funnily enough, who were in 33 different regions, and that is a major security threat in the sense of, yes, it was only 1 or 2 resources here and there, but that could mean data then crosses boundaries, between regions, locations, whereby you're not protected under certain data protection laws and stuff like that. So for me, it's users. It's a user-based thing. It all comes back to setting up the platform in the right way. So how can it be changed? How can that change? That can be remediated straight away. Well, straight away being, in a short period of time, in the sense that if we just design and architect our platforms in the right way, a lot of those problems go away. Past that, you'd be talking about perimeter security and things like that. you'd probably be very surprised in how much we see customers having WordPress sites, web apps, for example, even VMs that are connected to the internet and unprotected, or maybe have RDP access over a public IP and those kind of things. It's a user-based element, to be fair, and again, it comes back to upskilling and not knowing what you don't know. Major advantages and security benefits of cloud computing. So ironically, again, I'll circle back. Obviously, the first element is, you're moving from a data center in your own right. For example, if you're migrating from on-prem, because I'm taking that kind of angle from it, to be fair, that's where the question's coming from. You move from on-prem into public cloud, and the first thing you're going to note is it's a fully managed platform up to the infrastructure, right? You don't have to worry about hardware, you don't have to worry about firmware, you don't have to worry about, have I got a vulnerability in the Cisco UTS blade, for example. That all gets taken away. All of those challenges are gone, at that point, because they're managed by the public cloud provider. And at that point, that's a major security benefit, right? Time and time again in my infrastructure days, we've identified, your 2 firmware levels back, and this is, these are the vulnerabilities that you're missing out on, these are vulnerabilities you've got, for example. Just being able to move up that stack and take away those kind of BAU overheads is really, really powerful. But that can stretch out, of course, into things like, or extend out, sorry, into things like, Sentinel, Defender. The fact of the matter is you can increase, you can have such a higher level of visibility into the platform, because again, it's very easy to consume new services. Agility becomes a major advantage at that point. I can move quickly, I can deploy new services very quickly, I can test things quickly. I'm not restricted to hardware, whereby I could go today and I could deploy 1,000, obviously it costs a lot of money, but I could deploy 1,000 services into Azure, AWS, whatever that might be, very, very quickly, very, very easily. I couldn't do that on-prem unless I knew that I had a platform that would support it from a hardware limitation perspective. That agility is really, really key. And we're finding that that's where, agility from a BAU perspective, removing mundane tasks, are really, really key, from an IT model, if you will, where we're trying to adopt public cloud. But those security benefits, you've got to remember that, like the likes of Amazon and Azure will do basic DDoS on their platform as well. They're protecting their platform day in, day out. Sentinel is spun up from their own, security, in Microsoft world, their own security team. So they're constantly receiving threats, seeing threats, blocking threats, etc., which is a massive benefit to anyone who's consuming that platform as well. How does the Microsoft security offerings covered under E5 help? Well, a lot of it is Azure AD based, in my opinion. It's that user perspective at that point. Of course, if you're wanting to, before I step into that bit, if you're wanting to do data protection, the application layer and stuff like that, if you're wanting to, you've got legacy applications and, might be, you don't want to decouple them from don't want to decouple a client server model to client application from the back end server application, whatever that might be. AVD, you get rights for AVD to use, Windows 10, Windows 11 as well. So that is a great security element to that, to be fair, to protect users, make sure you've got a boundary, you can protect the data where it sits and where it flows. But a lot of it extends around to things like, MFA, conditional access, privileged identity management, just-in-time support and management, enablement, etc. as well. All those kind of elements that come from within those P1, P2 AD licenses obviously of course they cover the Azure stack as well. So when you're setting that kind of up, it's one eye on that kind of area. You can leverage those features that you get, obviously, for Azure as well. How do you manage spend in Azure and govern new spend without slowing down delivery? Which is a really interesting question, to be fair, because this one comes back to target operating model, tooling. What do we need? What services do we need to enable us to operate effectively within public cloud? Cost management and optimization tooling is really, really key there. And the whole idea, especially through managed cloud providers, is to monitor that spend, monitor your last months of spend, understand the breakdown of which services that you've consumed, and understand the trending information as well. So governing new spend is a really interesting one, in the sense that what you don't want to do is get to the end of a month and all of a sudden you've got a 10 grand bill that you're expecting to, because someone spun something up, left it there, which is easy to do. It's been running and running and running, and no one said to you, actually, what you're doing with this, spin it down. It's a load of, it's costing a lot. How do we automate those kind of things? So I know, give an example in IA Cloud now with the cost management, features that we're bringing in. one of them is, what are the new services that we've deployed in that last month? You know, what another one is anomaly-based detection. You know, my bills increased by 10% very quickly. How do I stop that happening? But all of that is done under a management layer, right? So you still have the agility of the platform itself. You can still continue to deliver new services, but safe in the knowledge that you've got that kind of level of support and management over the platform as well. So again, it comes back to that, like I said, it comes back to that target operating model, making sure that when you're looking at adopting public cloud, regardless of whether you use a managed cloud provider or not, that you actually look at those new services that you need to monitor the platform itself. And obviously, as we know, cost is a really big factor in that. So from a next steps perspective, by the way, thank you if anyone's asked any questions in the questions tab. What we'll do is we'll follow up with those after the fact, if that's okay, as well. Like I said, if anyone has any more questions, please feel free to drop an email to me, or if you've got an aligned account manager, just send them through that way and we'll get back in due time as well. But I mean, if you're interested in managed cloud, I mean, you know, appreciate you might be looking at you know, different options and stuff like that. I suppose the key thing is how do we build that visibility up? How do we make sure that, you know, when you adopt managed cloud, the first thing that any provider would do or should do is health check an environment. They should basically be looking at the environment and going, actually, these things should be done to onboard a platform. The analogy is you wouldn't onboard a burning platform. Not to say that anyone's would be, but from a risk-based perspective, it doesn't help you, it wouldn't help us, and inevitably then you just end up having a period of time where things aren't great. And really what you want to make sure of is things run great from the off. Okay, so one service that we do offer is called Cloud Analyze, and everything that we do in this slide is free of charge, pre-sales led. The whole idea realistically is giving you visibility into your environment. Okay, so it's not obligation, there's not a hook really, there's nothing pushing you to kind of go, you have to then pay Ultima this after that, for example. It's to give you the value and the visibility into your platform. What are you doing really well? Because there will be things you're doing really well. What could be improved upon, and what are you missing as well? Focuses on 3 key pillars. Cloud optimization is all around that, looking at your bill, understanding what services are used in that or used as part of that bill, and then understanding obviously are there any cost savings that can be made off the back of it. You know, the general things you'd expect, you know, orphan resources, right sizing of IaaS and PaaS, you know, licensing benefits, those kind of things. And we do, in some cases, we find anywhere between 10 and 40% savings on an average kind of platform, to be fair. Depends upon what you're using as well in terms of the services. But that's one key area, right? You know, it's a key area itself, but there are multiple. And architecture and security are those two other key areas really. Now, I mentioned best practice a few times now in terms of making sure that you know, you're relying on best practice, you're deploying to best practice, because inevitably then it does actually then increase your security posture, for example. You know, you know, the platforms can self-govern based on rules you set, those kind of things, and that all comes back to the architecture and security model, which inevitably then extends to the Microsoft Cloud Adoption Framework, the AWS Well Architecture Framework. Pardon me. So we look at, you know, that best practice alignment. You know, how well you align into key basic principles, but key principles all the same. And there's always something that we find, just to be clear. You know, we've never had a completely burning platform, I think it's fair to say, but there are areas that always could be improved upon, you know. So the point being is it gives you actionable insights at the back of it. Now, of course, to be clear, you know, we would then take the opportunity to pitch Ultima services. It's fair to say we would do, but the point really is at that point is, you know, we present them in a presentation format, much like this. After the fact, we give you a PDF copy, we discuss all the detail with you. You get a copy of those, and you can then choose to do what you want with that. So if you choose to move forward and work with Ultima, then great, we'd love to do that. But worst case, you get value in terms of visibility into the platform and some recommendations as well. Okay. The important thing is it's very low touch from your perspective. Whilst it's a 4-week engagement, 3 of those weeks are generally waiting for IA Cloud to hook into the environment and monitor, and then basically provide you know, accurate recommendations based on enough data, I think it's fair to say. But overall, you know, most of the time, most of those 2 hours will be spent being presented back to in terms of what we found. So like the last workshop, basically there's a initial presentation workshop. What is the service? How does it work? You know, what are the prerequisites? What do we need from you, for example? Then there's an onboarding piece, which takes 15-30 minutes, and then there's an hour workshop at the end for us to present back to you and discuss the findings. So most of that is basically you listening and taking in the feedback as well. Okay, but if you're a little bit further back than that, or you actually are consuming public cloud, but you know, you're looking at a larger migration, you know, you might have done a little bit, you might have dabbled a little bit, but you're now looking at, you know, you might have a compelling event whereby your data center is going end of support for a hardware perspective, you're exiting DCs or whatever that might be. Cloud Assess basically is all around that TCO model. Okay, so that again, it's free of charge pre-sales led. The whole idea is we leverage the vendors. So we leverage Microsoft and Amazon. They provide free of charge assessments or strategic assessments of your environment, of course at the server level, but they are now targeting things like platform as a service as well, whereby you might have, I don't know, a website, very basic static website that could go into a PaaS service. They provide you with an output there and give you pricing and an overview of the different pricing models, etc. as well, which is really great. But what it doesn't do is complete the whole circle. So looking at your application estate, what can go to IaaS, what can go to PaaS, for example, what have you got a future plan for to go to software as a service? You wouldn't really look at it right now. Which ones need VDI? Do we need AVD or a Citrix or something like that, for example, as well? Extending out to things like backup DR capabilities. What do we actually need to build in to enable this to be supported in the right way as it migrates? But that extends to things like landing zones as well. What does a platform need to look like in Azure and AWS before we can migrate? What fundamental building blocks do we need to put in? So building up the concept, giving you visibility of what that looks like and enabling you to make informed decisions before we start to look at things like migrations and then obviously the target operating model. What tooling do I have today? What do I need to do to I don't know, build the tooling further up to be more multi-platform, or B, what new tooling do I need as well? So it gives you that full project cost, if you will, life cycle, all the key decisions that you've made as well, in basically a technical document proposal format as well. Now this one has a little bit more in terms of then time required. Again, the 6-week engagement, we basically waiting at least 4 weeks for the tooling to run on a calendar month, to be fair, to gather the relevant information as efficiently as possible to capture the peaks and the troughs, right? But within that 4-week time frame, whilst that's running, we do carry out key workshops to talk about the applications, to, I suppose really as well, to educate you where you need to be educated on landing zones and those kind of things as well. So much so we can pop out the other side and give you that full kind of documentation as well. So it's a little bit more time required, but again, nevertheless quite light touch as well. So if you're interested in any one of these, and please feel free to get in touch. Again, non-obligation, you don't have to. It's just obviously if you're interested, you want to look at moving forward how you could do and have some advice and how you could do that, then please feel free to get in touch. That then concludes the lot of content. So I know we're way under, to be perfectly honest, which we had an hour and a half for this session, so you can get 40 minutes back at least, to be fair. But like I said, you'll get a copy or recording of this session anyway after this session. Any questions that you've asked, of course, after the fact, we'll respond back to you. So thank you very much for raising them if you have done. And equally as well, if you'd rather get in touch through, if you have an aligned account manager, or my emails at the very beginning of this presentation, you get a PDF copy of the PowerPoint deck as well. Please feel free to get in touch. Even if it's just this is what I'm looking to do, how would I go about doing that? What does that look like? But just like to take the opportunity to say thank you very much for your time. I appreciate you're all busy, so thank you very much for taking the time to attend this session. And yeah, hope you have a good day.